And hello again from Fox News in Washington. House Republicans unveiled this 45-page document Thursday that lays out their legislative agenda. The plan calls for smaller and more limited government, repeal of President Obama's health care reform, and cuts in federal spending and extending Bush-era tax cuts to help create jobs. Joining us exclusively today to discuss their plan, House Republican leader John Boehner and Congressman Kevin McCarthy, who was the driving force behind the pledge. And gentlemen, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
President Obama says your plan is nothing more than what he calls the worn-out philosophy of President Bush. Fact is, you do go back to the Bush budget. You would extend the Bush tax cuts. Congressman Boehner, how does this document show that the GOP has changed since the last election?
Well, I think it's pretty clear if you look at what's been going on here in Washington with all the spending, all the debt, all the government takeovers and control. What this document says is that we reject that. We want a smaller, less costly, and more accountable government. And we go through and lay out specifics, whether it's spending, whether it's getting jobs going, and again, in America, whether it's health care, national and border security, and the issue of reforming the way Congress does its business.
We're going to get into specifics in a moment, but Congressman McCarthy, a number of conservatives aren't buying this. Let's take a look at what Eric Erickson of the conservative website Red State had to say about this document. He said, it is full of mom-tested, kid-approved pablum that will make certain hearts on the right sing in solidarity, but like a diet full of sugar, it will actually do nothing but keep making Washington fatter before we crash from the sugar high.
Look, but National Review says it's bolder than the contract of '94. Wall Street Journal says it'll do more to shrink the federal government. Just like when the contract came out, there's going to be a tax on both sides. But remember what it is. This isn't a party platform. This is specific legislation that could be taken up right now before we depart that will shrink government, take away the uncertainty. The number one reason out there why jobs are not being created, uncertainty. They don't know what's going to happen with the taxes. They don't know what's going to happen from regulation. This could rein it all in. I mean, Washington is spending more time with comedians than debating the future of the economic future.
Okay, Congressman Boehner, let's get specific. Why is there no mention of ending earmarks in this document?
This is a document about now. This is an agenda that could be enacted today if the Speaker of the House would call it up for a vote. And today, we have a moratorium on earmarks. I can tell you that if Republicans win the majority in November, it will not be business as usual here in Congress. And the earmark moratorium.
It's a one-year moratorium that ends.
It's in place. And why wouldn't the Democrats this year join us in a one-year moratorium?
It's a one-year moratorium that ends in March. A number of your top leaders, including Congressman Jerry Lewis, who likely will be the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, wants earmarks back. Why are you willing to pledge right now, if you take over the House, the Republicans do, earmarks will be gone forever?
It will not be business as usual in Washington, D.C.
That's not answering my question, sir.
It will not be. Listen, you know me. I've never asked for an earmark in the 20 years I've been in Congress.
But a lot of your colleagues have.
I understand. It will not be business as usual.
All right. Congressman McCarthy, let's drill down into some of the spending cuts that you propose in this document. You talk about cutting non-defense discretionary spending, which is only 16% of the federal budget. And you talk about cutting $100 billion from that pot next year, which would amount to a 22% cut in those programs. You say you want to cut across the board. According to the White House, that means 200,000 kids would be kept out of Head Start. The FBI would cut 2,700 agents, and the government would detain thousands fewer illegal immigrants.
Look, for a guy that served on the Head Start board in my county for 10 years, I know that's not true. What I'm saying is discretionary spending. Now let's look at what has happened across America for the last 3 years. Every household has had to cut back. What has this discretionary spending done? It has been increased by 88%. We're saying find 8 cents out of every dollar. Do you know what we spend money on? Take, for instance, when you go into transportation, that's been increased. Every person that buys a first-class ticket on Amtrak for the sleeper car, we subsidize that by $364. That's $1.2 billion saved. If we decide that the American public shouldn't borrow 40 cents out of every dollar to subsidize somebody buying a first-class ticket.
Well, that's all right. That's $1 billion. How do you get the other $99 billion? I mean, the fact is, if you're going to do non-defense discretionary spending, It's a 22% cut to cut $100 billion. It's
It has grown by 88% over the last 3 years. It is not that difficult to go
Why
back
is
to
there not
pre-stimulus.
any specific cuts here?
It goes specifically down to we give
Not
the
in this, it
ability.
doesn't.
We give the ability from department to department to find where. We show programs where we show votes on the floor through UCUT where we've gone more than the ability to go through it, one after the other. What about when we laid out our pledge to that lumber company? No one there has had a raise in 2 years. But even Congress, when you look at the legislative branch, not the individuals, but the legislative branch has increased by 5%. We're saying you go back to pre-stimulus, pre-bailout numbers. We can live on that and actually find further.
Congressman Boehner, as Willie Sutton said about banks, entitlements are where the money is. More than 40% of the budget. And yet, I've looked through this pledge, there is not one single proposal to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
Chris, we make it clear in there that we're going to lay out a plan to work toward a balanced budget and to deal with the entitlement crisis. Chris, it's time for us as Americans to have an adult conversation with each other about the serious challenges our country faces. And we can't have that serious conversation until we lay out the size of the problem. Once Americans understand how big the problem is, then we can begin to talk about potential solutions. But I am committed to having that adult conversation with the American people because it is important for the future of our kids and our grandkids.
But forgive me, sir, I mean, isn't the right time to have the adult conversation now, before the election, when you have this document? Why not make a single proposal to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid?
Chris, this is what happens here in Washington. And when you start down that path, you just invite all kinds of problems. I know. I've been there. I think we need to do this in a more systematic way and have this conversation first. Let's not get to the potential solutions. Let's make sure Americans understand how big the problem is. Then we can begin to talk about possible solutions and then work ourselves into those solutions that are doable.
Congressman McCarthy, Speaker Pelosi says the House may or may not vote this week before they go on adjournment on taxes. I know that's one of your big issues. Why?
I think she's afraid. She's got 37 Democrats in her own party that say they want to extend. They agree with the Republicans in the principle that you shouldn't raise taxes in a recession, that you could lose 1.2 million jobs in the future to be able to grow. The Democrats have failed to lead on this. They're going to want to leave the House without dealing with it. That uncertainty itself is keeping capital on the sidelines and stopping jobs from being created in America.
Chris, the American people are asking the question, where are the jobs? And if we leave here this week and adjourn for the election without preventing these tax increases on the American people, it will be the most irresponsible thing that I have seen since I've been in Washington, D.C., and I've been here a while. The Speaker ought to promise a fair and open debate on making sure that we extend all of the current tax rates, end the uncertainty, and get our economy going again. Except that it sounds like they're just going to punt the ball until a lame duck session, and as a result, allow the uncertainty to continue, the economy to go slow, and no jobs being created.
Congressman Boehner, if there is a vote this week, you say you want to vote, and if the choice is just whether or not to extend the middle-class tax cuts, how will you vote?
I have made it clear I'm for extending all of the current tax rates. If we want to end the uncertainty and get our economy going again and create jobs in America, we have to eliminate all of this. I've also said the Speaker ought to have a fair and open debate. And if she's not willing to have a fair and open debate, she should not count on our votes.
If she took the pledge, you'd have an open debate. So you'd have all options. You'd have greater choice. And we'd have the country moving in the right direction.
I just want to press it again with you, Congressman Boehner. And you understand why. It's a ticklish issue. If they bring up a vote, extend the tax cuts for the middle class or not, do you vote yay or nay?
I want a fair and open debate so we can extend all of the current tax rates. And if the Speaker will offer and allow a fair and open debate, I am confident that there's a bipartisan majority in the Congress today to extend all of the current tax rates.
What's wrong, Congressman Boehner, with the idea of, as it seems is going to happen, because the Senate has already said they're not going to do this, of coming back with a lame duck session after the election?
The American people are asking, where are the jobs? We don't have jobs because of all the uncertainty coming out of this administration and this Congress. The Congress has an opportunity this week to end some of the uncertainty by allowing the American people to know what the tax rates are going to be at the end of the year. And to adjourn without dealing with this means that in their minds the elections are more important than the jobs for the American people, and it's just politics as usual.
It costs us $7 billion more because they want to wait. And how many more jobs does it cost to continue the uncertainty out of what's going to happen? How can someone plan to make the investment to create a new job if they don't know what the tax system is going to be?
Chris, they've got time to bring a comedian to Washington, D.C., but they don't have time to eliminate the uncertainty by extending all of the current tax rates. I think that's irresponsible.
Congressman Boehner, will the GOP win back the House in November, or, as some Republicans are now suggesting, have you peaked too early?
Chris, our goal is to earn back the majority so that we can renew our efforts to drive for a smaller, less costly, and more accountable government here in Washington, D.C. It's an uphill climb. But it is possible, and we are working to do that.
You realize that the political class, and we're a bunch of dopes, but we're going to say if you don't win back the House, oh, this is a defeat, even if you picked up 30 seats.
I understand that there are a lot of expectations have been set. There are more than 100 races going on in America that are in play. In a normal year, there's 20 or 30 races. And I can tell you that all but 2 of those are held by incumbent Democrats around the country.
If you do become the next speaker, there are some younger Republicans and some Tea Partiers who say you're too old school, that you, John Boehner, will not shake up Washington.
Listen, I come from a family of 12. My dad owned a tavern. I've got 2 brothers that have been laid off in this recession and 2 brother-in-laws. I get it. I understand what's going on in America. And I believe that I have the support of my colleagues, current and future.
So what would you do to shake up Washington? I mean, I understand this, but what are we to believe about Speaker Boehner? How would you run things?
Chris, I've watched speakers for 20 years. I've seen the good parts and the bad parts. And I can tell you this. I think it's time for a real, fair, and open process in the Congress. Today, you've got about a handful of people who decide the outcome of almost any bill. Even though 435 of us serve in the House, each of us representing roughly 650,000 people, I think every member ought to have the opportunity to represent his constituents, both Democrats and Republicans. And that means a fair and open process in the House, unlike anything that I've seen in the 20 years that I've been here.
Would you, and I know we're getting ahead of the course here, but on the other hand, the voters do need, I mean, I think they probably want to know how you would run things and what kind of a House it would be with Speaker Boehner. Would you see your role as Speaker as blocking the Obama agenda or looking for areas of compromise?
I think the American people want us to find a way to work together to address the concerns that face the American people every day. At the end of the day, this isn't about Democrats or Republicans. It's not about politics. It's about meeting the needs of the American people who sent us here to do their bidding.
And can you give me areas? I mean, obviously you have your agenda and you'd like them to adopt it. They're clearly not. You have the possibility of gridlock here. Can you see areas of possible compromise between a president at one end of Pennsylvania Avenue and a Speaker Boehner at the other end?
I think with this document, we make pretty clear where we're going. We're going to drive for a smaller, less costly, and more accountable government here in Washington, D.C. And to the extent that we can find common ground in that direction, I would welcome it.
Congressman Boehner, Congressman McCarthy, I want to thank you both so much for coming in today and answering our questions.